G'day, Stu from UAVfutures here, and today, well, we're going to be checking out this bad boy, and I really say that in the meanest sense. This is definitely a bad boy racer right here. This thing is seriously hardcore. Now what this is the RFX185, and I'm so impressed with this thing. I've had to go back and reshoot this intro scene because once I'd put it together and sort of felt how awesome it is and how light it is, I was so excited. And I wanted to reinforce that to you guys, just how awesome this thing is. So, what this is a ultralight, I guess, pure racing frame that comes in at a super lightweight. It's designed to rock some 5-inch frames, and it is going to be an absolute killer on the race course. Now, I'm going to stick it on the bench and show you how the kit comes, and then we'll put it together and check it out. Anyway, let's get started. Alrighty, now when you get the RFX185, it's going to come in this little Realacc box, and I think they're making some really cool stuff actually lately, but this is everything you get, and straight away you can see the sort of lines that this thing is going to have. It is absolutely focusing on a minimalist approach. It should have almost zero drag when it's cutting through the air. So anyway, let's jump in and have a look at what you actually get when you get one of the frames. So you get 4 of these, and these are what I'm going to call the support struts. You get 4 little arms. Right here, this is it for your, I guess, your base plate and your brace plate that's going to be sandwiching the arms together. Right here you have the top plate of your FPV camera, and I think this is like a top plate if you are going to attach a GoPro or something like that. Right here, these are actually the tiny little things that go around the side, so they're like your little side plates that protect all your internal components. And then this is your VTX and antenna protector right here. You also will get a whole bunch of screws because it is going to require a little bit of assembly. You get some standoffs, and then I guess you get these parts. This is for putting together your PDB that comes with it, and also some zip ties, so you get these little standoffs that go inside, and that'll hold your flight controller and your PDB. Anyway, what I really want to do, I want to have a look at the arms and the support structures, and then possibly these 2 little brace plates, and then I'm going to be putting it together, and we're having a look at the frame, and then we'll also have a look at some of the little extras, because I'll probably talk about this PDB as well. Anyway, so let's cut to the individual arms first. We'll do those. Alright, now I've got the arm right here, and the first thing a lot of people are going to think is, and I have these questions too, is a little bit about durability. So let's see just how thick this arm is. So we've got some 4mm carbon there. I'd say these are 0.1 off, but I'd say that's some 4mm carbon right there. And you can see it has a very small profile, so it's only coming in at about 8mm wide. So a super small little, or 8.5mm, super small profile across here, which means it is absolutely going to slice through the air. I mean, have a look at this is probably a typical size arm, so have a look at this size arm. This is on my old Catalyst, I can't know, the 210R or something like that, but have a look at that frame difference. Absolutely, you could fit like 3 of these arms on here. So this thing is going to absolutely slice through the air, and I predict it's going to be an absolute rocket. But in saying that, it is very thin as well, because they're really, to be honest, look, that's a fairly short little span, so I'm not too concerned, but I definitely wouldn't be putting the most amount of faith in this. So this is definitely designed for racers. I definitely wouldn't recommend this for car park racing or something like that against concrete, because it might snap, but I guess that's something we'll have to test and find out. On the outside here, you can see you've only got 2 little holes, and that's because I'm predicting you want to make this as light a build as possible. So that's going to be holding some 22 size motors, so that's what those are for right there. And you also, if you're looking at it, you get almost 0 motor protection on here as well. So in some of the frames, they have a big piece of carbon on the outside that actually protects the motor. This is nothing like this. This is all about pretty much building the fastest quad that you can. So if you're a serious racer, I definitely think that's what this one is going after. Now it does have some little other support arms, which we should talk about as well, some little struts that also go with it. So let's talk about those right now. Now you're going to get 4 of these struts, and they're even thinner again. So looking at those, they're even thinner, but they don't hold a motor or anything like that. All they are there is to keep the arms nice and rigid in place and probably share some of that load on an impact. Super thin. I think it looks about 4.5, so it's 5mm thick, and I'm predicting it's going to be 4mm. There we go, 4mm thick as well. And that is a super thin piece of carbon. And the way that sort of works is it hooks into each part of the motor just here and offers a little bit of support, and that will eventually all come together. And I'm not 100% sure on the exact build. We'll have to give me a little play with it in a second. That will all come together to have one sort of, I guess, like an X-frame configuration with these support struts around the outside. Now, obviously, it's going to go together a bit better than this. But so that's essentially how these parts are all going to work together and sort of hold a really, really rigid X shape. Now, once you've got all those together, what you actually need is some sort of way to hold all these arms together. So that is where there actually is a traditional, I guess, a base plate and a brace plate. So let's have a look at those. Now, here they are, and I don't think it matters which is which because they look identical to me. But what these are, they're the two little plates that will be sandwiching your arms together. So when your arms are on there, you're going to sandwich them between here. Now, I don't think it needs too much carbon around here, and I know it does look absolutely tiny, but I think actually, and I know that's about everything about this frame, I know it's about making the smallest profile possible and keeping it as light as possible. But if you've got those extra arm struts, I guess these support struts that are running along the side here like this, that's actually going to stop a lot of the force that would traditionally, without that, all that torque would go through here and maybe crack some of your carbon, so it would be a little bit more dicey. But I'm not feeling too bad about that actually. With this outside support strut, I think it's going to, you're not going to need too much of the carbon in the middle right here. Now, the thing itself, it looks like it's 2 millimeters thick, so yeah, there we go. So 2.1 millimeters thick carbon. So to be honest, I think that's going to be the least of your worries. I don't think this part's going to break at all. So I'm feeling fairly confident with that. Let's have a look moving on. We have our FPV parts right here. So let's have a look at those. Now, when I say FPV part, I think I mean the part cut out where you're actually going to have your FPV camera sticking out, because it is all going to be centralized directly in this tiny little cage sort of area. So it's all going to be here. So this is possibly going to be the very top of your quad, or I'm not 100% sure because I didn't actually get any instructions on how to put this one together, and that's something we'll talk about as well. It could possibly have a little space in here that you might strap a GoPro to. So you might run a Velcro strap through this one to attach your GoPro. So I'm not 100% sure about that. But then again, I don't know why you would be attaching a GoPro to this one, because it's definitely not designed for filming. It is designed to be as light as possible and pretty much to win races. So if you've got some races coming up that you want to perform in, definitely think about this. And then on top of that, you also get these little side pieces. Now, the very, very interesting thing about these little side pieces is they actually clip on the outside and they are held in, and I'm not kidding here, these tiny little side pieces, they're actually held in by zip ties. So they're only 1.5 millimeters thick. To be honest, that doesn't really concern me at all, because how often are you going to take I guess a hit in this part of your frame? So hardly ever. So I definitely don't think there's going to be any issues there, and they're about 1.5 millimeters thick each. So we're going to have 3 of those around protecting all our internal components. Doesn't seem like much, but we'll have to wait and see what it looks like in the build. And then the last little bit right here, the last little bit of carbon, because there is some more stuff to show you in the frame, is this little part. And this is your VTX antenna holder, and that's going to be strapped just to the very side of the top plate. It's a little bit hard to see in this part, so I have to show you a picture just here. But you can see how it clips on the top just there, and you can run your VTX up through the middle through that sort of round circular hole right here. Now, what else do we get in the kit? Let's have a bit of a closer look. Now, of course, you are going to get some zip ties, and that's very important, because that's how you're going to be actually holding in these little side plates right here. So that's what you're going to need your zip ties for. You are going to get some standoffs, and we should probably measure how thick they are, because I predict that's actually quite important in this frame, because that's where a lot of stress is going. So let's open these standoffs and have a look at them now. Alright, so they look like they're 5 millimeter standoffs. Not the thickest and probably not the strongest, but definitely not the thinnest either. But the important thing is everything in here is trying to keep it as light as possible. I do want to talk about these bolts right here as well, because this is kind of important. So you get all your nuts and your screws and those sorts of things, but these bolts right here, look how long they are. And that is really important, because you need this to be fairly strong. You don't have too many areas in this frame where things are strong, so you've really got to make the parts you have work as hard as they can and be as strong and rigid as you can. And that's definitely where these long, thicker bolts, these longer bolts are going to come in handy as they slide all the way into these standoffs. I think that's how they go together. I'm really predicting that'll make a solid, rigid middle section for your craft. And then finally, the last little thing you get here is one of these little maquette PDBs, and I'm really happy with how these go. I've heard a lot of good things about them, and they're a pretty reliable PDB anyway. So I know it's not the most exciting part, but it is really a good little quality PDB, and that's nice to have in excuse me, to have in there. Of course, you've got all your spaces to put all the wires for your ESCs and battery leads and stuff, as well as having like your 12 volt out and your 5 volt out, and some filtered power towards here at the back. Anyway, with all that said and done, let's put it together, and because I know you guys are going to want to see what this awesome ultralight racing frame looks like. So let's cut to that in 3, 2, 1. Whoop! Alrighty, so here it is, and after building it, like, I'm super stoked about this. I'm probably going to have to go back and reshoot the intro because I'm that excited. So here is the final build, and this is probably the question everybody's asking: how much does it weigh? So let's stick it on the scales and see how much it's coming in at. And is that oh, it has reset. It's coming in at, let's see, 81, 82 grams right on the border there. So that is insane for a 5-inch quad. Just as a bit of a comparison, let's see what I got around it. Here we go. For a bit of a comparison, now this is an old Armaton F1 pod, and look, I know this one still does have a little battery lead and things like that, but there's no other real components in here. But let's see how much that is. That's 175 grams. So this 5-inch frame is about half the weight, I guess, of an X pod. And I don't know how much a raw Martian frame weighs, because all mine are built up right now and I can't remember. But this thing is probably the lightest 5-inch frame I have ever seen. So I can't wait to get this thing in the air, actually. Now, looking at it, it feels really, really rigid. I'm actually amazed just how rigid this thing is, especially considering it's got just such thin bits of carbon, but it's got carbon where it counts. So all the parts along here makes for a super rigid, solid little frame. And before, how I mentioned, look, there's probably not going to be much motor protection on here. I was wrong. You know, you do have these little parts that stick out. It shows for some solid thinking right here. You do have these tiny little bits just here that stick out on the edge of your frame, and that's sort of a really clever design, actually, and that's going to try to protect your motor a little bit. So fantastic to see that there is a tiny little protection, a tiny little bit of protection, even in such a sort of minimalist type of frame. Now, some of the notes I do want to point out as well. Right here, you can see that I've attached mine with some little plastic screws, but when you get yours, all you're going to do is get the bolts, because these will simply screw into the bottom of your motors. So there's not going to be, the only thing holding your arms together is actually going to be the motor itself. So I've got some old Cobra motors just here, and you can see these holes right here. They're going to line up perfectly with just these right here. So that is actually what the screws are going to screw into, and it's actually going to use your motor to screw down and hold the frame together as well. So it should make a really, really solid, solid little unit. And again, it's helping to keep the weight down. Now, some other clever little additions right here. So this is the VTX part that I was talking about before, and that's got this little slider sort of mechanism right here. And I really think that's going to be in a really heavy crash. If you somehow land on the back and smash your antenna around, it's going to move a little bit. Of course, you've tightened these down, so it's not going to move in normal flight. And then I think if you have a really, really heavy impact, it might actually push your antenna back and forwards on here, which is kind of a good thing, and it will slide along this little rail, taking a small amount of the impact. Now, of course, in the top right here, and I don't know how well you can see it, you do have the standard HS1177 mount that comes and used to come with a lot of their frames. I don't really know what other options you'd sort of have to mount your frames in here, because you're not going to have very much room in here at all. And speaking of some little things I might like to change, on the bottom here, I've got 4 plastic screws in here. Now, these are the 4 plastic screws that came with it, but I really don't think, I think they should be some nuts. These little nuts just here, I really think they should be metal screws, especially if they're holding the arms together, because that's where most of the force is going. So I really don't want these little plastic nuts on the outside holding that down. I really wish they'd put like some little metal lock nuts or something like that on these ones right here. Now, I built mine a little bit differently to some of the other pictures. I actually turned this upside down and just had the nut on this side, but in some of the pictures online, I think on Banggood, I've seen the nuts on this side. But by doing it this way and having the head of the bolt on this side and the nut over here, you've actually given yourself a little bit more room when it comes to building. Now, why is that important? Because you don't have too much room building in here. Now, this is one of the, there's probably 2 big things on this frame that are not questionable, because I can understand where they're coming from, but are 2 big issues that you need to be aware of. Number one, if you wanted to build in here, you don't have very much space. So this is probably the tightest build you may ever see when you're building something. So there is hardly any space in here, and I think it shows with such a small profile everything is shrunk down, and you really need to be confident in your building skills if you want to build these. Or you better be watching a good guide, because I definitely think there's going to be a few little tricks that people are going to need to do to get it in there. In saying that, I know that people do run these ultra small builds, and I know it definitely is possible, so that's going to be very, very interesting here. I can't wait to see the builds that people do with these actually. And the other thing people are probably concerned about is probably the structural integrity of this. So if you smash this thing straight into a concrete pillar, or maybe dropped it from a high height onto something like a road, a hard asphalt road or something, how is this thing going to hold up? And my honest answer is, I'm not 100% sure. So if you want a frame that you can easily build and take heaps of abuse, this is not the frame for you. What this frame is all about, I think, is an ultralight minimalist racer that is going to slice through the air. It's going to allow you to get some massive 5-inch props for such a tiny little frame. There's going to be hardly any air resistance as it's cutting through. You've got tons of area for thrust. It's very, very rigid and a pure X sort of frame, very, very strong. This thing is designed to win races. That is pretty much its only goal. It is to go as fast as it can, be as nimble as it can, and to shed any extra grams of weight that it doesn't have to carry around. I mean, I've never seen a build which is the main way of holding in these little side plates is with zip ties. That's like unheard of. Usually you've got little sandwich plates of carbon and it clips down and screws in. This thing doesn't do anything with that. No, this is all about simplicity, and just zip tie it down and build something that is going to be an absolute beast, like a weapon on the field. So there it is. There's my review of the RFX185, and this thing is absolutely killer. I mean, look at it. I am so impressed with this thing. Now, I've reviewed a lot of frames, and I don't say this lightly, but this is possibly, I'm just going to say, this looks like it is, at this stage in this part 1 of the review, this looks like it's going to be the fastest frame I have ever seen. So I can't wait to build this thing up and stick like a 1000 milliamp 4S high voltage LiPo on here. It is going to absolutely rip. Yes, it does have, there's 2 considerations, so make sure if you're going to pick one of these up, even though it's really, really cheap, it's definitely not made for any concrete racing or anything like that, because I wouldn't want to stand behind saying that this thing is very durable. But I think if you're racing on flags and fields, this thing's going to be fantastic, which is where most of our races take place anyway, and that's exactly what this is, a pure racer. And it is definitely not recommended for a first-time build. So if you're after a bit of a challenge, or you've built a few quads before, definitely you're going to need to put those skills to use when you're building in here, because you don't have too much room. But if you can pull all that off, what you're going to have is an absolutely extreme racer that's going to absolutely rip and turn a lot of heads at the racetrack. Anyway, subscribe for more FPV related content. I can't wait to build this thing up, and I think it's going to be fantastic. But yeah, stay tuned for part 2 of the review, where we'll see what it looks like when it's got all its components in there and show you some flight footage. But yeah, subscribe for that, and as always, happy flying! This thing is so awesome. This is like one of the most purest racing frames that I have ever seen. Oh, I can't say that.